Thank you very much. Morning, everyone.
You've got half an hour. Take
Thank
your
you.
time.
First of all, apologies if I get a bit croaky. I've got a bit of a cold. Thank you for inviting me along to speak. I hope you'll find this interesting. It's very much safety. I might scare you a little bit. I might annoy you a little bit, but anyway, let's see where it goes. So I think you heard about where my background and the things I've been involved in. Just to give you what the things I plan to cover, a little bit of an introduction. I'll talk about HSE and its role in hydrogen, but net zero as well, and more broadly. I'll then talk about a few projects and some of the areas of interest. So there's some things that we've recently been involved in and have kind of wrapped up, and some things that are looking a bit to the future as well. I'll then talk about the international role and the international perspective. I think these are really important, certainly from where we've got involved and how we've got involved. It's important stuff to do. My view is there's a whole load of problems that we need to solve. Let's share them out and not duplicate it. Let's try and coordinate internationally. And that's very much what HySafe's about. And then I'll give a bit of a summary. Just to kind of talk about the pictures on the right. Just so the site in Buxton where I work, the Safety and Research Lab, we were established almost 100 years ago in 1926. Safety in Mines Research Establishment. Back then we were killing 5,000 people in the coal mines every year, and nobody really understood why. So the chap that we all recognise there in the bowler hat, he set us up back then to kind of understand what the problems were, and clearly we were very good at all that, and coal mining became very safe, but then the rest is history. Some of the other pictures there, just to give you a bit of a flavour of how things have changed. The picture next to Winston Churchill is our mining explosives test facility, which we still have, although it's not used anymore. And those poor guys, I think they were coal miners who came for a demo to understand what a dust explosion would be like in a coal mine. Where they stood, I can imagine they went home with their ears ringing after watching that demonstration, knowing what it was like. Just shows you how health and safety has changed. We'd have them hundreds of metres away now, wearing ear defenders, high vis. Probably not a hard hat, but we'd go to lots of trouble. Bottom picture, that's the facility in Buxton. That's the main building. We're also on a 500-acre site, and you'll get a bit of a flavour of that as I go through. Okay, so as HSE, as part of our mission, I think this is the 2023 HSE plan, enable industry to innovate safely to prevent major incidents, supporting the move towards net zero. So that's firmly in there as part of our plan. And you can see what it's about. Try and work with other bits of government, work with industry, basically enable all of that to happen. And we're doing our very best to do that. Like for lots of bits of government, it is a challenge, but we're pushing to do all of that. The three pillars in HSE, which is the picture, net zero picture down there with the blobs. Science, policy and regulation. I come from the science bit, and you can see the things we do. Research projects. As part of HSE's mission in the Health and Safety at Work Act, it says that HSE will do some research where it's appropriate, and that's what it does. There's an important bit there about experience from inspections and incidents. And this is really interesting, particularly when we're talking about novel use of hydrogen on non-industrial sites. On industrial sites, generally speaking, people know what they're doing, particularly if they've used hydrogen previously, and that gives us as HSE a bit of confidence. There's lots of applications out there where people haven't used hydrogen before. There isn't a lot of experience of using hydrogen in those environments in that way. So we don't have a backlog, a history, if you like, to kind of learn from in terms of understanding what some of the important safety lessons are. And it'd be really good not to have to go through that pain, not to have incidents, to learn from incidents. And is there a smart way we can do that? And that's something we're thinking about all the time. Policy and regulation, I won't say too much more about. Clearly, hopefully it's clear what it's about. Policy is more legislative, more high level, and then the regulation of the people who are out there on the front line. And I get involved with those people when things go wrong or when they need some support. Moving to the picture, top right here, which I'm sure most of us have seen. So this is how we use energy in the UK. Don't want to say too much about it other than the blue line, natural gas, boy do we rely on it. And it does a really great job. The gas network is there, it's a great asset. Clearly, there's a desire to use that for hydrogen. Lots of work to try and make that happen. It'd be interesting to see how things move forward. It's an interesting debate. I think it's already been mentioned. In a way, you'd like to electrify everything, but we're not starting from a place that makes it sensible to electrify everything. We have this fantastic asset that allows us to distribute lots of energy when we need to. We need to make use of that, and it will be interesting to see where the debate goes. And the bottom picture there is from, I think this is Royal Institute, I think, Royal Society, sorry, in their idea of using, instead of curtailing wind, electricity from wind, using that to produce hydrogen, store lots of hydrogen, and that we can use to supply electricity when there is no wind or renewable energy. Really important idea, something we've really latched onto in the UK. Be really interesting to see where that goes. Clearly, we have some unique resources in that respect. Okay, part of HSE, I can't give a talk without showing you some pictures of things that have gone badly wrong. All of these happened in the spring of 2019, so it's a little while ago now. Maybe they're becoming a bit less relevant. The top left up there, as you're looking at it, that's the hydrogen refueling station where there was an explosion in Norway. No one was really injured. Some car airbags were set off and the cars weren't even moving. It was quite a strong explosion. The interesting thing about that incident is that Norway still hasn't recovered from the impact of that in terms of hydrogen vehicles and getting them back on the roads. It's had a massive impact over there, really dented confidence. I think the fact it's also very cheap to get an electric vehicle over there might help as well, but anyway. Bottom left is Santa Clara in the USA. This is the Air Products Depot, where they supply hydrogen to most of the refueling station network in California. They had an incident, managed to damage a number of their trucks, completely stopping that supply chain such that people with hydrogen vehicles could no longer get hydrogen for a period of weeks, which caused a major crisis as well. And then the one on the right-hand side here, this is the one that happened in South Korea. Large explosion. This was a project that used wind and solar, drove electrolyzers to produce hydrogen, which they stored, and then they used that to feed back into fuel cells when there was demand. Still some mystery about this, although I think it's clear what happened. There was a very violent explosion. You can see, this is absolute carnage, not what we want to see. 2 people died, 6 badly injured. They were probably collecting hydrogen and oxygen in those vessels, which is a bit unbelievable and clearly has dire consequences. In terms of the work we do, it's about science at scale. So we have a 500-acre site. Everything we do have some small labs where we do some small scale stuff, but generally we're more interested in larger scale work. Top left, liquid hydrogen. I'll talk about that a little bit more. The middle picture is our tunnel facility, and the top right picture here is our tunnel facility in operation. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment as well. Across the bottom, these are from work we've done with the gas industry. So we've got the facility we built as part of H21 to look at lots of components that came out of the gas network and see how they performed with hydrogen, and that contributed to H21. I think that was 5 years ago now, 6 years ago. Yeah, bye. How time flies. Centre picture. This is about exposing materials to hydrogen for extended periods under different conditions to see how it affects their material properties. And then the bottom right picture here is kind of some of the practices that the gas industry do and how do they have to change with hydrogen, and that's called clamp off, squeeze off. I was close, sorry. So gives you a flavour of the sort of stuff we do. It's about working with industry, working closely with them, understanding what they're doing, and then trying to apply some science to what they've got to make it all better. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some EU projects now. This is a project called Multi-High Fuel. And what this project is about is getting hydrogen on the forecourt next to petrol and diesel. At the moment, it's very difficult to do that in Europe. There is no level playing field. There's no standard way to do it. You can see the project partners there from across Europe. Brings together a range of industry and R&D, as often these projects do. And the aim is to develop a common strategy for hydrogen refueling stations in a multi-fuel context. What do we need to know to do that? And how can we get harmonised standards and even a harmonised approach to make that happen? A little bit difficult. I think this actually started before Brexit, this project. So a little bit difficult now as the UK to maybe fit into some of that harmonised approach, but we will see what happens. What you can see there is we're doing some tests to simulate a leak from a hydrogen refueling unit to understand the sort of consequences you might get. So we've got what we call a gerb, it's a strong ignition source to make sure that the hydrogen ignites, and you can see the hydrogen flame coming out the side. And what we want to do is understand, for a typical hydrogen refueling system, what kind of conditions do you get, and then what kind of precautions do you need to put in place to limit the impact of those. This is the High Tunnel project. So this is another EU-funded project. Again, partners across the bottom. This is about tunnels and tunnel safety in terms of hydrogen vehicle incidents. We're all familiar with the fact that hydrogen, very buoyant, all of those things. If you're out in the open, the idea with hydrogen vehicles, particularly if the TRPD operates, you rapidly lose that hydrogen. You might get a jet fire, but generally it's going to happen in a fairly safe way. Inside a confined space, it might not. What do we do about that? There are some things to trade off. How fast do you want to empty the hydrogen from the tank using the TPRD? How do you set that up? In a tunnel, maybe you want to do that more slowly so that you don't produce a violent release of hydrogen, a dangerous release of hydrogen. You produce a more gradual release of hydrogen that's dealt with by the ventilation. Lots of things to weigh up here and understand. So we did a range of work in this tunnel, looking at TPRD failures and the sorts of hazards that they produce, but also looking at simulated tank failures as well, so that you can understand what they're about. Clearly, if TPRD doesn't operate, or doesn't operate soon enough, then your tank fails, and what are the sort of consequences that you get as a result. And you can see some nice condensation rings coming out the end of the tunnel there in one of the tests. This has got quite a loud bang in it. I think the sound's on, isn't it?
Yep.
So this is a bit of video of the tunnel. Don't want to startle anyone, but I think this is about 350 grams of hydrogen. And there's a few things I'll kind of mention about it once I've played it. So first thing, this is simulating a tank failure. It's scaled down a little bit. So about 0.35 kilograms of hydrogen released almost instantaneously. We have a system where we have a double bursting disc to simulate failure of a tank. It's quite a big opening. We can get it to fail at whatever pressure we want. And then you release an amount of hydrogen very quickly into the tunnel. One of the important things to notice there is that it ignites itself. There's no ignition source in there, just the nature of the release ends up with an ignition, which in some respects is really good, I think, depending on the situation. And then clearly you get quite an overpressure. In some of the tests, we got quite dramatic overpressures. Is it better that something like that happened? Probably not, compared to a slow release that your ventilation can deal with. But you need to be sure that all those things can work and it works effectively. So that's the sort of work we do. All of this is from the project is being fed into a program to get it into the new tunnel standard, European tunnel standard. What I found interesting is that although there are certainly hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of compressed natural gas vehicles running around Europe, quite a few of them are quite large vehicles, buses, trucks and other things. No one's ever thought about any of that or updated any of the tunnel standards to think about any of it, and here we are with hydrogen now. We are thinking about it. Sorry, right. Liquid hydrogen. So this is something we've been involved in since about 2008, maybe 2010. As probably many of you are aware, there is no liquid hydrogen production in the UK. So when we want to do some experiments, we have to get our kind friends from BOC or another company to bring us a road tanker that they bring to site, about 2.5 tons of liquid hydrogen, and we then plan a program of testing around that to investigate what happens. There's a bit of a timeline there showing the things we've been involved in. So there's some early HSE funded work just to investigate liquid hydrogen, the use of liquid hydrogen, implications of using liquid hydrogen as, say, fuel storage for a refueling station or something similar. Published a number of documents there, which if you go to the HSE website and look at research reports, a lot of our stuff is published on there. So you should be able to find it. And then there have been a couple of projects. The Presley High project. These projects have been given names by our German partner, by the way. They're nothing to do with us. Presley High project, which is pre-normative research into safety of liquid hydrogen. Then a few other projects around aviation. And then we're currently involved in what's called the Elvis project. And I forget exactly what Elvis is about, but it's about releases when you're doing transfers. So quite a bit of work in the liquid hydrogen space. Pictures at the bottom there, just to give you a flavour. Clearly, you release liquid hydrogen. It's very, very cold, minus 253 degrees centigrade. So different to LNG, it's colder than the condensing and freezing point of oxygen and nitrogen. So what happens is you start to condense nitrogen and oxygen out of the air. You cool the ground, you get a pool. We're releasing, I think they're about 300 or 400 grams a second, something like that. So quite a heavy flow of liquid hydrogen. And eventually what you form is this slush puppy on the right here, which is condensed phase oxygen and nitrogen with hydrogen, which under the right conditions behaves a bit like an explosive. Worth saying though, if you're handling liquid hydrogen, there's a whole load of things that you need to get really badly wrong to get you to this position on the right here. So there's lots of things which I'm sure Ian could confirm. But generally handling it, this doesn't happen. But as HSE, we need to think about if there were hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people handling liquid hydrogen one day, inevitably you're going to get some stuff like this that might happen, and you need to be aware of it. Just moving on the liquid hydrogen area, we're working closely with an organisation called Aviation Technologies Institute. They, during lockdown actually, and I think it was purely coincidence, they did a program called Fly Zero to think about decarbonising aviation. Clearly, really difficult one to decarbonise, probably the biggest challenge, aviation. What do? All built around jet fuel right now. Clearly SAF is an option, synthetic aviation fuel. And in the interim will become more and more prevalent. But ultimately, I think, and maybe I won't see it, I don't know, ultimately they think liquid hydrogen is the way to fuel aircraft, unless something else comes along. Will be really interesting to see. I know they've thought about, and you're probably aware, they've thought about batteries. There isn't the energy density yet. It's a problem. There's a problem also that with aircraft, they always like to land much lighter than they take off. It's a requirement. That really doesn't work for batteries unless you're going to do something with them along the way. So liquid hydrogen is the thing that they're really focused on. So we've been working very closely with them. You can see some of their ideas there in terms of different aircraft. Two distinct arrangements and then a hybrid. So they're thinking fuel cell to then drive electric motors on propellers, or gas turbines driven directly by hydrogen, or even a hybrid of the two is a possibility. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both. This is another slide from Aerospace Technologies Institute, which hopefully brings some of the key things out, some of the key challenges they've got. Like we've already talked about down the left-hand side there, they're thinking about infrastructure. Skills are really important. How do they do lots of that? But there's also lots of research that needs to happen. There is no supply of liquid hydrogen in the UK right now. How do you get around that? And we're trying to help with some of that. by maybe having a facility on our site. To put together basically the components you need for an aircraft, those are some of the challenging components that they need to think about in terms of how you, and this is very much for a gas turbine, in terms of how you would make that work. Having a pump that could go on an aircraft and the aircraft still fly, that could handle liquid hydrogen, does not exist at the moment, is a really big challenge. So, this is a long way off. There's some massive challenges here. And the things on the right are really important as well. Handling liquid hydrogen, generally there are some good steels for liquid hydrogen. Those probably aren't great for making aircraft. So there's a massive materials challenge that lots of UK universities are getting involved in, to think about what new materials are there, what novel materials are there, composites and others we can put together to think about some of that. Health and safety is clearly a really important part of it, which is why they're keen to work with us, and also thermofluids. At the end of the month, Aerospace Technology Institute are going to put out 3 reports. They're reviews basically of capability, some key issues and capability around the world in the materials, health and safety and thermofluid spaces. 3 separate reports. So look out for those on their website. Might be useful if you're interested. Okay, quickly talk about HiSafe now, because I think I'm probably going on much too long. HiSafe came out of a network of excellence in the early 2000s. That was funded by the European Commission, was 25 organisations from around Europe. It then, in 2009, at the end of that funding, turned into an international association which is self-sustaining. You can see some of the members there. That is out of date now. There's I think there are now about 60 members, 60 plus. Really nice organisation that brings all these things together. Lots of different perspectives, lots of different points of view, lots of exchange. Every 2 years, and this happened in the autumn, we do a research priorities activity. And I won't go into detail here, but hopefully you can understand where some of it's coming from, in terms of what are the key issues right now, in terms of the applications that we have, applications that are developing, and the things we need to think about in the safety space, understanding phenomena, understanding safe design, having codes and standards and all of those things, which is in the matrix there. If you follow the link at the bottom there, which I realise isn't great, it's a bit obscure, then you can go and find the report that all of this comes from. It's in a recently launched hydrogen safety journal. This is a fairly new journal launched by Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, heavily involved in HiSafe. We work very closely with them. And that document is in there. Other documents that are out there, there's a handbook, Hydrogen Safety for Energy Applications, if you're interested. Very comprehensive, covers lots on safety. And then previous documents on the research priorities activities we've done. And this one on the far right, that's what one of our research reports looks like. And it will have a number, RR, with a number afterwards. Bit of a plug, but just to make you aware, we do a conference every 2 years. This autumn, in September, we have our conference in Seoul, Korea. Interestingly, usually we get about 150 papers. We have over 230 papers, I think, for this conference. There's a very large number from the UK, which is great to see. Really important, supported by a number of key organisations. If you're really interested in safety, it's something to think about. I realise getting to Seoul is not trivial. It's interesting that we're there. If you remember, I talked about the Seoul incident that happened in 2019. Now we're holding our conference in South Korea. Okay, so quickly wrap up and then hopefully can answer some questions. I think the first one goes without saying. We want all this hydrogen stuff to happen, but it has to happen safely, and that's what we're really keen to make happen. There's key topics that we're trying to address. Much of what we're looking at, as you probably spotted, is stuff that's not typical, not normal conditions. So what are the new applications? Where are people using hydrogen in environments and in ways that they haven't used it before? Quick comment about scale and location. As hydrogen grows as a technology, particularly with things like refueling stations and people wanting to have large amounts of hydrogen in places where they've not had it before. There are some key regulations, COMA regulations. If you are going to use more than 5 tons of hydrogen, you will get into lower tier COMA. If you haven't chosen the right site to put your COMA site, then you won't get a site there. So you need to make sure you really work on that. Start at the very beginning. If you're even thinking about it, talk to us. And not just COMA. There are some other regulations. Hazardous materials consent, which you need to get at 2 tons for hydrogen. Again, talk to us as soon as you can, because it's not trivial. And if the site isn't suitable for 2 tons of hydrogen, you won't get 2 tons of hydrogen there. It won't be allowed. So something just to keep in mind. Speak to HSE as soon as you can about it. Already said, the international community, IEA, HySafe and others, really important to all of this, and a bit tongue-in-cheek. Hope to see you all in Seoul. But honestly, if you're interested in hydrogen safety, it is very much the place to go. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I think Stuart will be happy to answer a couple of questions if you have. And we've got here rolling mics. If you just raise your hand and.
Thank you. So Joe Hobbs from Hydrosun. I was quite interested by the hydrogen in tunnel experiment, and you said, quite a pop and quite an overpressure. What sort of level are we talking about? Are we talking about everyone losing their eardrums, everyone losing their car windows, or worse still?
It depends on the amount of hydrogen that's released and how it's released. Probably the best thing to do, because there were a number of tests that were done, is to point you towards the High Tunnel website, hightunnel.eu, where many of the reports are. Yeah, in that particular test, you would have lost your eardrums. It's clearly, it's not a trivial event at all. And if you weren't in a tunnel and you were close to something like that, you would have the similar problems.
And a very cheeky follow-up question, which is, did part of that work consider the withstandability of tunnels or typical tunnel designs?
Yes, it did.
Thank you.
Including looking at the effect of high-pressure erosive jets on concrete and similar, because clearly that's not trivial either with hydrogen jets.
Question here.
Thanks. Adrian Wilson from Life, a hydrogen developer.
Hi.
You said talk to HSE early. How do we do that? Is there a pre-app process, or do we phone you up, or I've got your email address now? How do we do?
Well, if you've got me, that's a good start. I won't be able to give you all the answers, and if it's a very difficult question, I'll pass you on to someone else very quickly. No, I'm only joking. But you can find us in the phone book. Find the website. There are lots of local offices. I'm not sure where the nearest one is. Is there one in Middlesbrough? Maybe there is. I'm not sure. So yeah. But then make it clear what it's about, because local inspectors might not necessarily be familiar with the route through to getting hazardous materials consent. Use those words.
Hi, Farouk Qureshi from Phoenix Contacts. Just going back to the tunnel test that you did, you mentioned that there's lots of LNG vehicles around and no such testing has been done. Have you done anything yourselves?
So not so much LNG. So there are a few LNG vehicles in the UK. I was very much thinking about CNG, compressed natural gas. What you see there is I think we were probably at 500 bar, but it doesn't matter if you're at 100 bar, a few hundred bar. All it takes is a small failure and you can release an awful lot of hydrogen very, very quickly, and it's very, very turbulent, and it's the turbulence that gives you the overpressure. It makes everything burn very, very quickly, can give you flame acceleration, and in the worst case, can drive things into really severe explosions. I mean, that's a severe explosion. So for CNG vehicles, although CNG is not, methane is not as reactive as hydrogen, no one had really thought about any of that. None of it found its way into the tunnel standards that I'm aware of. You mentioned LNG, so there are LNG vehicles. There are also liquid hydrogen vehicles starting to appear as well. So Daimler with their Gen 2 truck, which refuels with liquid hydrogen, and I can see Ian pulling a face because none of it's trivial. But it would be really, and this is maybe something for the future, a similar sized pipe failure on a liquid hydrogen tank compared to a compressed hydrogen tank in that type of environment. What might the consequences look like? How different might they be? I think it'd be really interesting to have a look at that.
Hi, Stuart. Kumar from Teesside. My question is in relation to your liquid hydrogen experiments. Your dispersion, have you validated with the models you have developed, and has there been any damage created to the sensors because it is a cryogenic conditions, so very substantially low temperature?
So, in terms of the projects we've been involved with a number of partners, University of Ulster, other international partners, who have taken lots of the data that we've used and done validation of some of that. They're still working that space. The models aren't perfect, but they are developing. In terms of the sensors, there's quite a nice correlation you can use with thermocouples and measuring a rapid change in temperature that allows you to understand what the concentrations are likely to be. So we've done lots of that and validated some of that as well. And crudely, in terms of the cloud of condensation that you can see, because it's condensed moisture from the air, that roughly gives you the flammable envelope.
So how long it took to take that slush out, the condensation?
I don't know, but I think it fizzes away pretty quickly.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not very stable at all. Clearly, when there's lots of thermal radiation coming in, there's a massive difference when you're at minus 250. The environment's at around 0.
Hi, this is Venkat Krishnan from Teesside University. From my experience, or rather from talking to some folks regarding refueling stations and so on, they do tend to put the interim storage of hydrogen at minus 40 because they're going to fill tanks, and you've got the negative Joule-Thomson coefficient, which causes temperature rise. Would that explain probably the high reaching the ignition temperature when a large amount of hydrogen is spontaneously released into the oxidizing atmosphere like air?
I don't think the 40 degree. So I think it's minus 40 degrees. So a refueling station, you pre-cool.
Yeah.
And the idea of pre-cooling is to make sure that when you've filled the tank, you don't exceed the maximum operating temperature of the tank. Because if you go above plus 90, I don't think your tank's not serviceable anymore.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's
the
what
same
it's
analogy.
about.
The same analogy is if your temperature rises, you could reach the.
I don't think the minus 40 is going to make a big difference there. I think you are still likely to get ignition.
I see.
But that is a release from a tank failure anyway. At a refueling station from the nozzle, there are lots of controls in place that would stop it releasing in that way. Yeah. So I think your general point, yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Can you sort of thank Stuart in the normal way, please? And really,
Thank you.
many thanks